For those of you who are staying here, we've got, I think, 5 different alums from different periods, all participated in the honors program or the honors college. And we're going to have them introduce themselves. They'll be able to talk about their experiences at Western and in honors, and talk a little bit about what's happened to them since, and then take your questions, just like we did at the Q&A panel before. So I think we ought to start with that right now. And I'm so thrilled to see some of these people because I haven't seen some of them for a few years. So welcome back. We're glad to have you part of this. I'm just going to start and I'll just pick somebody and have you do your introduction. And then everybody in the audience is just welcome to ask questions using the Q&A. And I'll try to queue them up here. So I'm going to start, I think, by our most recent grad, and I think that would be Joe. Joe, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, sure. Good to see you as well, Scott. My name is Joe, and I graduated from Western in 2020, so peak pandemic. Since then, I had gotten my master's in economics from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and currently I'm a PhD student in public policy at New York University. At Western, I obviously did the honors program, and I had a double major in economics and Spanish with a minor in mathematics. So yeah, happy to talk about grad school, experiences in the honors program, how it prepped me for what I'm doing now. Yeah, anything else?
No, that's great. I think people are going to have questions for all of you. So thank you. Then I think Anne was the next. Anne?
Hi, I'm Ann Huntimer. I graduated from Western in Honors in 2018. I'm currently a graduate student at the University of Minnesota. I'm in the 4th year of my PhD in neuroscience, which is crazy to say out loud. I think that was everything.
All right. And I don't actually know if, yeah, I think, Tobias, you graduated after Danny, I think.
2014?
No, it was 2016.
Okay, so let's do Danny
I'm one
first.
more senior.
All right, Danny first.
All right, yeah. So hi, I'm Danny. I use he, him pronouns. Like I just said, I graduated in 2016. I majored in economics with minors in math and energy policy. Right after undergrad, I did a 1-year master's degree at the University of Toronto, which was funded by a Fulbright, which I have honors mostly to thank for that. I think Dr. Moore actually retired, unfortunately.
He's still here.
Oh, he's still there. Awesome. Yeah. So thanks, Dr. Moore, for that. I wouldn't have even applied without him. And then I spent 3 years working at the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond in Baltimore. And after that, enrolled in my PhD program at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is where I am now, in economics.
All right. And they're not all economics people. It's just.
I'm definitely not.
Total coincidence.
So, Toby.
Yeah. So I graduated from Western in 2014. I did a double major in history and Chinese language and culture, which they didn't have a Chinese major until the year after I graduated. So now it would just be a Chinese major. Yeah, and then I did a lot of different things. I got a master's degree in international relations, focusing on China at the University of Washington. Did a Fulbright in Taiwan, again, thanks to Dr. Moore. So I could also field some Fulbright questions. And then I kind of hard pivoted my life into the tech industry, and now I work in video games for Microsoft on the Halo franchise. So you can do all sorts of things with your honors experience. But if you have any questions about Fulbright or history at Western, I'm happy to answer those.
All right. Mimi, you graduated last year, right?
Yep. Yeah, I just recently graduated in 2006. So one thing that I've learned is that as you get older, you have to just constantly keep saying about like how old you are. So get ready for that. That will happen to you. Yeah, so I graduated in 2006. I was a poli-sci and English as a second language major. So I actually joined the Peace Corps after I went to Western and taught English in Africa for a couple of years. And then I came back and went to law school. I went to law school at Berkeley. And now I'm a lawyer. I do employment law. I went to a firm and went to the Gates Foundation, and now I work at a tech startup.
All right. So you've got a lot of different experiences here. And so our goal is to allow folks to ask questions about honors and that influence that it has had on, your life since. I'll just start because they'll start coming in through our Q&A. But I'll just sort of start and ask you now, from your perspective, a few years out, where did you see the value of being part of the honors program or honors college now that you have your perspective of being passed? And we don't have to have everybody answer every question, but if you have an answer that's a little bit different than someone else's, please jump in. So does anybody want to take the first try at that?
So I have one that it was a surprise to me. So after I graduated and went to the Peace Corps, and it had been a long time, I was still really good friends with a lot of my professors in the honors program because they're smaller classes and you have sort of repeat teachers. And so you get to know them on a really human level. Like you go to their house and you meet their partner. And so I had several professors who I still kept in touch with. And so when I decided to apply for law school, and lo and behold, you need like references, and I didn't like have adults in my life who could vouch for me. The professors from the honors program were my references and wrote beautiful references for me. And I'm sure was one of the primary reasons why I got into Berkeley, which is a phenomenal law school.
Yeah, we write a lot of letters of recommendation, and partly it's because our students are so spectacular, but partly because they're in small classes. And when in those small classes, you get to know, and as advisees, you get to know a lot about them as thinkers and them in terms of their hopes and dreams and their different skills and their different perspectives. And so we can write pages about most of our students. And that's different than when I was teaching in classes of 80 or 150 or 250, where I can pretty much just say they took the exams and they passed. So anybody else want to answer that question about their honors experience now from your new perspective of Danny? Are you reaching?
Yeah. So my focus in economics is urban economics. And in urban economics, we have this concept of agglomeration effects, which is basically one reason cities are so productive is you have a lot of different industries there and people from different industries interacting with each other, and there are kind of positive spillover effects that wouldn't necessarily happen if everybody with kind of a homogenous background were in the same place. And that's where I feel like a lot of my value in the honors program came from is I formed these really close, but also close relationships with other students who were from different fields that I had no interest in really and would never have taken classes in. And those were and I was taking classes with these students, and like in seminars that were really discussion focused, we were kind of bringing the framework we were learning in our different fields to discuss things in another field that we weren't necessarily studying ourselves. And I think there were a lot of agglomeration effects from that, you know, I was then, you know, taking those being influenced by those frameworks and bringing that to economics and thinking about economics in a different way than I would have. And so I think that was a lot of value that I got from honors that I absolutely was not considering, you know, at 18 years old when I was first entering it.
Yeah, I have heard that from quite a number of seminar teachers, that the experience of teaching at that level, but then having no prerequisites. So students come in from all different backgrounds. Like I've taught a seminar a few times on this technique to, you know, enhance petroleum production called hydraulic fracturing. Very controversial, but you can't really buy a gallon of gas these days that wasn't produced through fracking. And we had, you know, some environmental science students, environmental studies, geology students. And then we also had chemistry students, econ students, a couple of poli-sci majors, well, and a German major. And the class is just so much richer because of those different backgrounds coming in to the discussions. Joe or Toby or Ann, do you want to talk about?
Sure. I'll come at it from a slightly different tack because, like I said, professionally, it was instrumental in my professional life until I kind of changed career tracks. But from a personal standpoint, one of the best things about honors, and I had extra exposure to this because I was on the honors board, which is sort of the student and faculty governing body of how the honors board is run and directs its resources. You get a lot more time with your professors and you get to know them more as people. And Mimi also talked about this. You get to go to their houses and you know, meet their families and you form a much closer bond, and it makes your school experience richer, and you learn more you learn more about how to navigate life through those relationships. And that was really valuable for me, in part because, one, when I went to Taiwan to do my Fulbright, then I had some experience sort of navigating student-teacher relationships. And then I was placed into a primary school environment where I was speaking a language that I had studied but was not fluent in. And I was really able to leverage those skills to, one, understand my students better, but also understand my fellow teachers better. But another thing that ended up being really useful about that is I really got a handle on what the life of an academic is like. And then I went on to marry someone who is a professor of history at university. And that really, I felt a lot more prepared to navigate life as the partner of someone who is in academics, thanks to that. That's sort of a niche case. It probably won't apply to most people, but you never know what path life may take you on that you might have benefited from through honors.
I would echo what everyone else has already said. Scott just wrote me a letter for a fellowship application, so those connections definitely last for a long time. And then also, as a STEM major, I majored in behavioral neuroscience at Western, and something that I appreciated more, I think, as I climbed in level at Western was taking introductory classes in small courses. So usually things like Psych 101 are like 100 or 200 people lecture halls, which is still small compared to a lot of other schools. But I took Psych 101 in a class of 25. So like the enrichment and the exposure to like introductory level classes and the connections that you make with those faculty start a lot earlier, and I would say are a lot more impactful as well. So that definitely helped me in terms of like getting a strong foundation early on in like introductory science courses as well.
Yeah, I would echo everything as well. And oh, sorry. But I did want to add as well as I think that honors really just reframed the way that I approached learning. I think like coming into Western, I'd gone to just like a small rural public high school. So it was very much you get education to get a job, get good grades, that type of just monetary capital type reference. But I think through honors with the small class sizes and the way that the professors just like genuinely cared about you as a human being and a student, it just became really enriching and gave me more reason to learn for the sake of learning, and then eventually like producing knowledge instead of for just like getting a job or something like that. Even though the honors program, I think, definitely gives you skill sets to get a job after college. So I think it's just a very nice whole perspective that the honors program gives you.
Do you remember, and this is to all, do you remember what your capstone project was, your honor senior project was? I mean, how do you reflect on that experience now? You know, given, you know, that many of you have been through graduate programs and professional programs, and, you know, did the fact that we required you to do that thing, are you glad we made you do that? Toby, you got your hand up.
So my capstone was interesting. I was as a history major, you have to write a sort of capstone paper anyway. And so I combined my capstone for honors and my capstone for history into a very, very long paper, which ended up being about the Crusades, which was not what I originally intended to write about. But my first choice for mentor for my paper went on sabbatical the year that I had to do this. And my second choice was an adjunct professor, and he got a full-time job at another university. So I ended up doing something that I had not planned to do. But I found it absolutely fascinating. And what this is sort of a bittersweet thing, but Western publishes your capstone papers, and so they are accessible. And I've had people cite my capstone paper, and I can see how many people have viewed it and downloaded and cited it. And my capstone is more cited and viewed than my poor wife's dissertations. So you can really get some reach through that. Like it's a pretty amazing thing to be able to do as an undergraduate.
Yeah. Danny, your hand is up.
Yeah, so I I think positively of my capstone project, and I wanted to start with that because I was going to say that my experience is less unambiguously positive than Toby's, meaning that I think it benefited me because in order to do good research, you have to do a lot of bad research first. And my capstone project was bad, and like I didn't know it was bad at the time, but like I look back on it now and it's embarrassing. But you know, I learned a lot, and I learned a lot about you know, what aspects of the research process from the inception of the idea to how you carry it out produces that research. And you know, if I didn't learn it then, I was gonna, you know, push the horizon of when I stopped having very bad research every single time a little bit further. So yeah, I think it was really important to do undergraduate research, but like most undergraduate research, do it poorly.
And your project was a neuroscience project, right?
Yes. So I'll start with saying, like, more generally, this is like a plus for Western in general, because of the size and the close relationships that you can often make with faculty. Western's a really great place to do science research as an undergraduate, in a way that like a much larger university might be hard to get established with like individual faculty mentors. So I spent 3 years of my undergrad working in a research lab using like electroencephalography, which is a fun cap to like measure brainwaves and stuff. And my thesis project was basically, or my capstone project for honors was basically, I was the lead person for a project that I, with help from my mentor, sort of like designed and executed, and collected the data for and did all of that. So I wouldn't go so far as to say it was like a mini PhD, but it definitely sort of exposes you early on to like what Danny said. Research is hard and goes wrong a lot or most of the time. So like figuring out how to sort of roll with the punches and troubleshoot while you're on your feet and see the things that go wrong and see the things that go right was a really valuable experience to have before I started graduate school.
if maybe wants to say anything about her senior project, she's welcome to, but I have a question that came in, and this is asking you to think way back, and it's kind of the finding your people question. So how did that work for you? Like, especially, what would you say to first year students, incoming students, as far as the finding your people when you got to Western?
I can speak to that. I still remember like the very first like honors weekend where you come to, and you spend like the weekend in the dorms and you register for classes and you do all that type of stuff. I met my roommate and people that lived in my hall like when we were there. And so that was really great to have people that I knew I would be seeing later, and that you could just kind of grab and be like, hey, like I want to go to a Model UN meeting. And so you can have like a buddy to take with you to go to different extracurricular activities where you can test out the waters and essentially like find people that are like-minded or you have similar interests. And I think the honors program was really helpful in just kind of providing you a bunch of potential people to just drag along with you or to drag you along with them. And so I had like a really nice time like meeting people at Western that I think was definitely like due to the honors program. One of my best friends I met the first weekend in the honors program, and she just lived right down the hall. So yeah.
I've heard that story so many times, Toby, you have a...
Sorry, I was also typing an answer. So I think I'm a bit of, maybe not a unique case, but someone also asked in the Q&A, is there a divide between honors students and non-honors students? So I came to Western, I'm from Edmonds, Washington, so not super far away from Bellingham. A lot of people from my high school went to Western. So I came in with a bunch of people I already knew. And I didn't live in Edens. I lived in Buchanan Towers, which is, I think, still the most southern. It's like a decent like 10-minute walk for you to get to any of your classes from there. But it's not, it's not affiliated with honors, and so almost no one in my building was in honors. And there was a benefit to that for me, because it meant that I didn't necessarily immediately only hang out with the honors students. And I don't think that is something that most honors students do, to be fair. But when you're also not living with everyone, I kind of had to go find the honors people, and they became my people more in my second and third year. And I was really happy to find them because they're an awesome group. But I think, the point is, you can make choices that put you where you think you will find your people. You can join clubs, you'll find people through your major, most certainly. Like when you're in the honors college, you aren't only taking honors classes, like you have your whole major. You're going to meet a lot more people probably through that, because your classes will be larger. And just talking to and meeting those people will give you opportunities to find events, find cool things to do after class, and you'll meet the people there. I think for a lot of honor students, your people do end up being mainly in the honors college, just because by nature of joining the college, you have something in common, and there's an openness to learning and discussion that really brings people together there. But you can absolutely, and I think easily, also find your people outside. And in my experience, no one will treat you differently because you're in honors. Like people who aren't in the honors college, frankly, I don't think they really care.
They don't.
In honors.
And
so
we kind of, and this is the way the students prefer it. We don't have the word honors in 8-foot letters across Edens Hall. We don't have swag. We don't have tattoos. It's been here forever. And it's not like anybody hides it. It's just that it creates this little community that's one of many communities, and hopefully very inclusive, safe, welcoming community. Hopefully that you all felt that way, and let me know if you didn't.
respond to one of the questions that I saw in the Q&A that came up a bunch is kind
Yeah.
of around if the classes are harder or they take longer to complete. And I think the panelists today are like kind of geniuses, myself excluded, but don't feel like that's not a requirement. That's not everybody in the honors program. Yes, you have some of these like shiny stars, but I think mostly it's just that if you like to learn and you like to read and you don't mind writing, you'll do great. Like, I don't have really any doubts that anyone on this call can do the work. I would say it's not really any harder. It's just different. And in some ways it was easier for me. I think it was more sort of small group discussion, which I excel in, whereas the bigger classes, non-honors classes, are more like you sit, you get lectured at, you take the notes, you study on your own, you take a test. That was quite hard for me. I just am not very motivated that way. And so I did a lot better in my honors classes just because it sort of played to my strengths more. So I wouldn't say they're necessarily harder. I think they were more fun and a little bit easier for me because they met my strengths.
Yeah, thanks. I've heard that many times. Danny, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Mimi said and to kind of add that I think the biggest distinguishing factor between the honors classes and non-honors classes is not rigor or difficulty. It's more the approach to the class. I think it's designed much more with the idea that you can put as much effort into the class as you want to kind of like tie it to your level of interest in it, your approach to learning. Like, I knew people in my economics colloquium who did very little of the reading for that class, and I was the only one I knew that did every last bit of reading. And that was just because I was very into it, because I was the type of person who would go on to get a PhD in it. And so, and then likewise with some of the third year seminars, I took, I think, 3 of them, at least 2 that I remember. And one of them, I just got very weirdly interested in Russian literature through that seminar. And so I put a ton of work into it. I dedicated way more time than I needed to because I chose to, and I didn't have a whole lot else going on that quarter. But then when I took a different seminar that was at a time I was a little busier and I didn't have as much interest in the subject, I'm not naming it to protect the innocent. And I didn't, and my grade didn't suffer because I still engaged with the class, but I engaged with the class only as much as what was really expected of me. And so with honors, there's a lot of room for that. And the other side of it is that it will be more reading and discussion focused than its analog in the non-honors classes.
Okay, so there's still some other questions here, but and I thank you for those of you that are doing typing answers as well. One thing that I kind of wanted to hear from you all is about other experiences that you had at Western, besides things in the Honors College. So I know, Joe had a job over in the economics and business college that I think had a pretty big influence on your college experience. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So I think starting my sophomore year or halfway through my sophomore year, I can't exactly remember. I worked at the Center for Economic and Business Research, which is a consortium of just like students at Western. They're all undergrads or recent graduates that are advised by Hart Hodges, who is a PhD in the econ department, as well as James McCafferty, who is more of like the business side of things. And so that was a really great way for me to, I think, like Anne had said, just really mess up with research in a controlled environment, while also getting, I think, a nice balance like really rigorous academic research looks like, to something that's a little more like business and job oriented. And so I think be like, okay, this is something that I enjoy doing. It's something, oh,
You froze for a second. Go ahead. You're good.
oh, sorry. But I think working there just kind of solidified my wanting to continue with research into graduate school, into something a little more rigorous, something a bit more academic. And it was a great way for me to test the waters and build connections with people who would eventually recommend me for graduate school. So I really loved my time there. And yeah, I think, Scott, you're totally right. It was instrumental in where I am now.
Well, and there's so many honor students that have worked through that research center. Well, you know, that's the thing about Western is, you know, and because prospective students are weighing everything from tiny little liberal arts colleges to big research universities. And, you know, Western is in this middle ground where we have great researchers. I mean, in every single department, great researchers. And when they talk about their research groups, for the most part, they're talking about undergraduates. And the people that they meet with weekly, the people that they write proposals with, the people that they take to conferences, their research group are undergraduates. And that's a pretty cool thing. I mean, there are graduate programs here. They're relatively small. They're mostly masters. Like in my department in geology, we have a nationally known graduate program, but they take 12 students a year, right? So it's really small. And so when faculty are talking about their research groups, it almost always is undergraduates. So Danny, were you going to add something to Joe's story?
Yeah, I was actually going to add to what you're describing now. I actually just this last year went back and visited Western and Washington and all that for the first time since the pandemic started. And I brought my partner who had never seen Bellingham and all of that. And when we were talking about stories and I was talking about relationships I had with professors or how I got my first research job, she was really surprised because she went to UVA, which is about the same size as Western, but has PhD programs, a law school, a medical school. And she was saying that like she didn't know anybody, let alone, you know, have the experience herself, who kind of like had those close relationships with professors and like knew as many and like got as many opportunities due to professors kind of like knowing them and connecting them with opportunities. Because in that environment, which, you know, UVA is an excellent school, no shade to UVA, but you know, they're more focused on their graduate students, because that's the incentive structure of academia. Is if you have graduate students, like you are very invested in them excelling in a way that you aren't kind of just an undergraduate in your department. And so I do think Western, the size of it, it's just big enough to have a diverse array of opportunities because it has so many different departments and has enough money for research funding, but also small enough that professors know their students fairly well, the students in their department, they're invested in those students. And, you know, if they think of a good opportunity for them, they will refer them to it. And that's how I got my first research position. And, you know, I was law school bound at that point, and I would be much less satisfied with my career. I feel very confident saying if I'd gone to law school instead of gotten that first research opportunity and realized that's what I liked and that's what I wanted to pursue. And that was a faculty member who referred me. I had not seen that position posted.
You know, and since many of you left, there are a whole array of new institutes and centers, interdisciplinary institutes and centers at Western. I mean, Canadian American Studies has been around for a long time. Border policy research has been around for a while.
But BPRI was my first research job, just
yeah.
for the record.
An Energy Studies Institute, which is very, very active. They're now applying for having graduate programs. And a new Disability Studies Institute that's going gangbusters. There's a Leadership Institute. And these are kind of the programs that cut across college boundaries and department boundaries, that students can do minors and even majors in. Okay, so I got a question coming from a staff person about, I think it's about Fairhaven or Running Start with honors. I'm assuming that that's, you know, coming from the audience out here. So I'll just say a little bit. I don't think any of you were part of Fairhaven. Is that right? Yeah, I don't think any of you were part of Fairhaven. So Fairhaven is our interdisciplinary college at Western, in which students are allowed to basically build their own majors. And we do have students every year who do both honors and Fairhaven. Fairhaven is it's kind of alternative education in the sense that they don't have grades. The students all write their own evaluation at the end of classes, and the faculty write written narratives, and generally very small classes. So there are students who do both honors and Fairhaven, and you know, the kind of trick to it is our general education classes are designed to replace sort of the standard general education program at Western, and Fairhaven has its own. And so students who are doing both Fairhaven and honors get to do both of these small sets of discussion-oriented classes. So that there is a compatibility there. Some of the students who start in both will just, you know, eventually steer and just do honors, and a few will eventually steer and just do Fairhaven, but most will, you know, finish out and do both. And then there's also a question about Running Start, and I don't know if, I know all of you came in with well, at least most of you came in with a fair amount of credit when you arrived, you know, through AP or IB, or I think, Joe, you had a lot of college credit through the community college over in Idaho. No?
Mine were all AP credits.
Oh, they're all
Yeah.
AP. Okay. So, but in Washington, and I'm kind of talking to the out-of-state students here, in Washington, we have this program where our students can take college classes while they're in high school at their local community college and earn up to an associate's degree. So they'll graduate from high school and graduate from a community college with an associate's degree. And those students then come to the university and are able, you know, still to do any major, but as our advisor said earlier, you know, they're under a bit more pressure to establish that major right away and move on. Typically, even students with an associate's degree will still be at the university between 2 and 3 years to finish out. And that works with honors. And we have a pathway in honors that students will still take the first year sequence of classes because it, in fact, I think Toby might remember some of the discussions back when you were on the honors board of whether the Running Start students should still take the first year sequence. And it was made very vehemently by the Running Start students that that is such a valuable experience, to not cut out that experience. So what we do is then we exchange the colloquium, which these Running Start students don't need more general education classes, for more seminars. And so they'll take 4 seminars instead of 2 colloquia and 2 seminars. And one of them told me that that was more like, you know, getting extra dessert at dinner to get more of those seminars. So I'm looking, there's a lot going on in the Q&A, and some of you are answering them. I don't know how you can type so fast while you're also talking. I guess if it's your job, you do that kind of thing. There's a question about, can you take honors classes without being in the honors college? And the answer is generally no. So we would like people to go through the application process and show some commitment to want to be part of the honors community. You know, once in a while, we'll have a faculty member teaching a seminar, and they'll have, you know, a favorite student from their major that they've been mentoring, and they're teaching a class. And so on some rare exceptions, but in general, you need to be part of the honors college to take the honors classes. Now, the exception is the honors calculus sequence, which is offered through our math department. It's mostly honors college students, but you don't have to be honors college students, and the honors general chemistry sequence. Oh, and it looks like Danny answered that too. So there's another question that says, as someone with a fear of public speaking, did anyone struggle with honors classes because of that anxiety? You know, can you think back to when you were in these classes in which discussion was so important? How did that work out? I mean, anybody have that as an experience?
I can speak to that a little bit. Have always been more on the introverted side, and especially growing up and my first couple of years at Western, I was very quiet and did have a lot of sort of anxiety about being brave enough to do presentations or discussions. Always a little nervous about that, but I actually felt that, especially with like the first year series where you're doing a lot of like book related discussions, I always felt really supported and heard and acknowledged by like my classmates and my instructors. So while it felt really scary at first to be brave enough to make a comment about a philosophy in a book about Gilgamesh or something like that, I always felt like I was heard, and it never went poorly for me, or really anybody else that I saw that I also struggled with speaking. And I would say that I also sort of grew out of that anxiety with time. A lot of honors classes also include presentation components where you can choose to give some sort of presentation about a topic related to class. And through a lot of those like positive experiences, you sort of, the fear starts to go away over time.
Somebody asked whether the Honors College issues each of its graduates a cat. The
I
answer
still
is
have
no.
mine. Oh,
Wow, that cat lived a long time.
yeah, I know. I know the Guinness Book of World Records is
Man.
coming to oh, look at that. Danny's got his cat right
Danny's got his
there.
cat. I gotta go open my door and see if my cat will come in.
Gonna say,
Apparently they
gosh.
do.
That's
So-
a dog, not a cat. Just figured I'd show the little bit of diversity. Though I will say, dog came with the relationship. If it were up to me, we'd have a cat.
Yeah, well, some of you know that during the pandemic, I started doing this thing because, you know, we were limited to contact, and I started doing this thing called dog walk office hours. So I would walk up to campus with my dogs and meet, you know, up to 4 students, and we would just go for a dog walk, either on campus or up in the Arboretum. And, you know, sometimes they were all first-year students just meeting each other, and other times they were, you know, there'd be a senior and a junior and 2 freshmen, and they would start talking about, you know, what are you doing for your senior project? And, you know, how did you get into a research group? And, you know, I just hand them the leash and they just walk, and it was really good. And so we can continue doing it. Dog walk office hours. So cat walks would not be quite the same, I think.
I don't know.
So-
There are a lot of people here in Madison who walk their cats on a leash, so I wouldn't rule it out.
No comment. No comment. All right. So another another question is here. If you can recall being a high school senior, I mean, and I know that there's a lot of water under some of your bridges now, but why did you choose Western and Western honors way back then? Because you were from all sort of different backgrounds in different places. Do you remember why?
I remember why. I don't know if my answer will be very satisfying. So I grew up in California. I knew about Western because my cousin had graduated from Western, and we'd like come to visit and seen her graduation, and I toured the campus then. So it was always on my radar. And I applied and I got in, and I came for like the on-campus tour. And I had an inexplicable gut feeling that Western felt like home in a way that like none of the other places really did. And I leaned into the gut feeling, and I think I made the right choice. But that was, the gut feeling was the decision maker for me.
And I will point out, and I said this earlier, Western has 2 admitted student days, which are for the whole campus. The whole campus will be full of people. The first 2 Saturdays in April. But we also, in the Honors College, host visitors 3 days a week, Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And those visits, again, can include lunch with current honor students, a visit to the dorm, and sitting in on one of our first year classes. And so that offer is out there. Toby, you want to talk about your?
Yeah, so I distinctly remember making this choice. It was an interesting year in 2011 when my cohort was deciding where to go to college, because this was a year that the University of Washington had been outed as giving special preference to out-of-country students to be admitted. And so no one wanted to go to UW that year in protest, because we all felt like it, it wasn't fair. But I had a slate of options on the East Coast, and like Lewis and Clark down in Oregon and a couple other schools. And I mean, there were 2 sort of really blunt, straightforward reasons that I ended up choosing Western. One was a bunch of my closest friends were already going there. And another was money, that, it's an in-state school. And I had gotten a scholarship and I wasn't going to UW. So, and I think both of those reasons are fair and cogent reasons. I was talking to a high school senior this summer about, where she was choosing, or this fall actually, where she was going to end up going next year. And I told her, there's always something to be said, 1, for saving money, and 2, for knowing people when you're going to a new situation, because college can be overwhelming enough, and if you know people where you're going, then it'll be a little easier. But those aren't the only reasons. I had already been accepted to honors when I made that decision as well, and that was a huge reason for me, that at a lot of the other schools that I had potential to go to, their programs either they didn't decide as early, or they didn't decide until you were already there. It wasn't something that started in your first year. And so I knew when I was going to go to Western that I was going to get an elevated academic experience no matter what. And that made a big difference for me. But one other thing that I really quick want to say, someone asked, they said they were from Seattle in the chat, and they asked, what's it like living in Bellingham? And I love to say this quote. I do this every year. And someone from just north of Seattle, me, I would say Bellingham is just far enough away that you don't have to see your family every weekend if you don't want to. But if you need something, it's really easy to get them to come to you. So if you are from the Seattle area, I think it offers a lot of really great options in terms of it's a good size, but it's not too big and it's not too small, and it's just far enough away from home that you feel independent, but you're not stranded.
And if you're not from Washington, we have an airport right here. And Southwest Airline is now servicing Bellingham, and so it is really easy getting to a lot of different places, right? Direct flights into Bellingham now through Southwest. So there's a question that was about, I guess I would call it the inclusivity question. Did people find Western to be a welcoming, and especially Western Honors to be a welcoming community? And whether you were part of an underrepresented group or a underserved group, or if you just had friends and you knew of that, how did that feel for you while you were students? Danny, you want to jump on that?
Sure. So I'm bisexual, and I found Western very welcoming. I actually I entered my freshman year, the year that Referendum 74 was on the ballot. 74. Was it 74? The one that legalized same-sex marriage in Washington by public referendum. And I like volunteered on the campaign. It was very front of mind for me, my very first quarter of college. And I came from a very conservative small town, so it was something I had a pretty big chip on my shoulder about, and Western made me feel very comfortable. I likewise in honors felt fairly comfortable. I don't know how much more I could say, but like I, at the time didn't feel comfortable being out to faculty and even a lot of my friends, but that I wouldn't say I think that was in spite of comfort in the environment rather than, because of a lack of it. There were several faculty who were out. I had friends who were out and seemed fairly comfortable in that environment.
Our student services division here at Western recently reorganized their kind of diversity services, and it I think it's a model that should be looked at across the country because it's so strong right now. So we have our multicultural student center, and as part of that is the kind of overall diversity services. And if you look at the daily listing of activities that are going on, it is extraordinary how many different choices there are for when you heard, oh, well, you guys weren't on, but the students who did the tour were talking about all the different things that they've done, even as freshmen. They've only been here 6 months. All the different things that they've done that the university is sponsoring. So let's see. Anybody else want to jump in on that? All right. Well, I need to be aware that we only scheduled this to go to 12:30. And so for those of you out there who still might have questions that you want to ask of these wonderful humans, there was the question about, do you think it looks bad on a grad school, med school application if you start the honors program, but you don't, but do not graduate with a completed minor? Looks like someone's going to answer that. I mean, my sense is it doesn't matter at all. I don't know.
I would be surprised if anyone is really able to like put those dots together. Like there's nothing on your transcript that says like did not complete honors.
Yeah.
Like I think you'd have to know Western really well to be like, oh, look at that. They took some honors classes and then no other honors classes. Like I just think most people would say like, oh, look, they took a couple honors classes in their freshman year and that was it.
Right. That would be my call as well.
But also you'll finish it. It'll be fine. You're fine.
Yeah, I mean, most people do. I mean, I think the senior project thing has kind of traditionally been a decision point where a few students will decide not to go through with that. We, in the last few years, have started a senior project prep class, a 1-credit prep class. And what we've noticed is that students who participate in that prep class, their projects are consistently stronger. And so starting next year, the incoming cohort will be required to do the senior project prep class sometime before, their last year. And I think that's going to make a big difference. And I think it'll help with retention in the program as well. What percentage of the students in this year's cohort identify as white? So I think we were at 28% students of color. So, which was pretty close to I think maybe a little bit above the overall university demographic. Yeah, so the big difference between the honors cohort demographically is more the geographic diversity, because we'll have students from many different parts of the country. You know, the Western as a whole is probably around 10% out of state. And in the honors college, it can be 45% out of state. So there are students coming from a lot of different places. Yeah, looks like, yeah. All right. As an institution, I heard Dr. Lindemann say that much attention has been paid to hiring incredible teachers. Are there clearly so many other great things? Are there things happening at Western that are growing edges issues? Tara, I'm going to have to think about what that means. There's, oh, you mean, so the university has pretty much paused growth. The admissions director talked about this year's freshman class being the biggest ever, and it was by a few, the largest ever. But I don't think there's a plan to significantly expand student enrollment. Oh, I see. So like leadership challenges. Yeah. So, you know, this is a really interesting place when it comes to hiring. And I have served on many dozens of hiring committees, both for staff, lots of faculty hiring committees, and leadership committees, administrative committees. We always get a lot of applications. Bellingham is a very desirable place to live. The university has this fantastic reputation as being a pretty good place to work. We have a unionized faculty, which helps as far as supporting faculty, you know, wage-wise. Bellingham has become more expensive lately, which has turned into a new challenge. Pretty much in the last 5 years, Seattle has had that same problem. So that is an issue that I think some are struggling with. But, you know, in my old department in geology, oh my gosh, when we have an opening, like right now, there's an opening in geology, and they got a huge number of applications from all over the country. And I think 3 of their 4 finalists are people who have tenure track assistant level jobs elsewhere who are looking to come to Western. So it's a very attractive place for people to come in. And if we can deal with this housing thing, and right now the housing prices are dropping a bit, which is good. I have a question about percentage of professors from underrepresented communities. Yeah, we had for the last almost 10 years, we've had a provost initiative of diversity hiring. And so it's not required that the hires are from underrepresented groups, but it means that the casting of the net, you know, the advertising has had a particular focus on trying to diversify the faculty. I don't know the actual number right now. My sense is that it is pretty closely reflects the student diversity numbers, but that's always going to have a lag in general, because, you know, you hire faculty to be here 30 years. And so I think it's changing relatively fast as the turnover happens. Okay. Do any of you have something, you know, some sort of itch of something that you would say to prospective students or their family members about your experience at Western? I mean, I just want to tell you how nice it is to see you all again and to wish you the best in all of your endeavors, because I know you're doing all sorts of crazy things. But is there anything you'd want to finish with?
I have some parting words.
Okay.
My parting words are that you will be happy and successful wherever you choose. You are smart, hardworking, great people. And so Western is a really great place. And also, if you don't choose Western, wherever you go, you'll be great. So I know it's really stressful and hard, but you'll bloom wherever you land. And Western, if Western is that spot, you'll bloom at Western too.
Well, 100%, 100%. Danny?
Yeah, I just wanted to, this is something that kind of I thought of during the finding your people part that I ended up not saying. Is just that, at it's hard to know right now in the position you're in as an incoming student, who you'll be and what you'll value, and the experiences you'll have in your third and fourth year. And something that I kind of experienced that I didn't really expect is, like, so much of my college life was going to be was determined by jobs I had on campus and the people I met through that, and student government that I was involved in. And a lot of it was not at all directly influenced by honors, but that honors was kind of always in the background, in terms of just like a lot of, like, when I needed advice about graduate fellowships, I knew exactly who to talk to because they were professors I had in honors classes. And I could kind of always go into the director's office or the fellowship office and just kind of like talk to ask my kind of like nebulous questions about where I wanted to go and like how to kind of funnel my aimless ambition into something relevant. And I had people that weren't part of my main friend group, but I knew from honors classes, who, when I would see them around, like, we would be able to connect on in ways that I wouldn't have from people I just knew from regular classes. And so something that a lot of the role that honors will play in your life as a college student are things that we couldn't possibly tell you will happen and that you couldn't possibly predict right now, but odds are that it will be unambiguously positive in kind of just tying together all of the various experiences you'll have in college.
Okay. Toby, do you want to say something? I want to see if Joe or Ann want to add something, and then we're going to wrap up.
Did Joe and Ann have something? I've been talking a lot, so I don't want to steal time.
Joe, is there something you'd say?
Sure. Yeah, I think that choosing Western was honestly like I think it was like the first domino in a string of like very, very good things that I was very lucky to have happen to me. And I think a lot of that I can attribute to my experiences like in Western as a whole, meeting really great people, not only through honors, but also through like different extracurricular activities, or in like other classes totally unrelated to honors or faculty and whatnot. And I think that was also like being at Western was like the first time I think that I really, kind of going back to the inclusion thing as well, was the first time that I really felt included in my identities being valued, as I also like grew up in a super conservative town. So I think Western as a whole in the honors program just really gave me a great springboard to jump off of and really leverage my opportunities. So if I had to go back and I had to decide again, I would unequivocally choose to go to Western. But once again, like if you don't, that's also okay.
You're gonna make me cry. So nice. Ann, anything you'd add?
I agree with what everyone else has already said. I would also just repeat, choosing your undergrad school can be really hard and overwhelming, but it's really important to trust your instincts. I know everybody sort of goes through a stage where you're looking at everything on paper and trying to figure out like which school is the best. And I did that too. And there were schools that looked really, really great on paper and just didn't feel right in person. So like really listen to that little voice in the back of your head that knows what you need, because it's probably going to make the right call for you.
Here's a story, and then we'll finish with Toby. But we had 242 students in the cohort this year, and they were all in our Honors 101 class in the fall. And at one point I asked them, you know, raise your hand if you have felt like you were an imposter, like you didn't really belong in something like an honors college. And I bet there were 238 hands went up. And so if you're out there and you're doubting this, sometimes you just have to, like Ann says, go with your gut and see if you can imagine being in an inclusive, supportive environment. And because that's what we try to make. Toby, last word.
All right. So I try to sneak this anecdote into every single one of these, but it's really easy to conceive of something like the honors college as like, just more academically rigorous, more, more talking, more thought-provoking discussion, all this stuff. But it's not just that. And this example, I think, helps prove it. When I was in the first year sequence, in my second class of the first year sequence, we were reading The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot, and Dr. Moore, who's also a fellowship advisor, was my professor for that. And we got to the end of it, and he snapped the book dramatically and said, "Great, now go memorize The Wasteland." And I said to him, "Dr. Moore, if I do that and repeat it to you, can I not write the final paper for this particular class?" And he said, "Yes." And so I went back to my dorm and spent 3 days just rereading The Wasteland over and over again and committing it to memory. And I promise you that was way more work than writing the essay would have been. But then at the end of those 3 days, I walked into his office and I recited The Wasteland from memory, and I got an A. And I legitimately don't believe I could have done that outside of the honors college, because one, I would not have had the relationship with my professor to confidently ask that question. And two, I just don't think, you get quite as much flexibility out of non-honors classes just by their nature. They have to cater to a much larger group and they need to be more regimented. So don't just think of this as an opportunity to, do harder stuff to get a better looking CV when you're done. This is an opportunity to make your college experience your own in ways you haven't even imagined yet. And that is true no matter where you go, but I can tell you for sure it's also true at the Western Honors College.
Well, let me now just thank these 5 wonderful people for giving us some time on a Saturday morning. And you're from all over the country at this point, and you know that I'm wishing you the best, whatever it is you're doing next. And please keep in touch. We have just such wonderful alums, and I love hearing the stories of your successes and your challenges and your cats and your dogs and your kids and everything else. But we do need to wrap this up. And so thank you again, you wonderful humans. And I hope everybody out there in the audience has a wonderful weekend. If it's snowy where you are, be careful. Just go out and play in it. And with that, I think we're going to wrap this up. Thank you everyone for coming. If you have questions, you know how to reach us. And so thanks for coming. And we're going to end this webinar now. And good luck with your college decisions, people. And our application deadline is March the 7th. All right. Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend. I'll see you around.